How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Chair Talk. Guys, great discussion today. We're going to get a little bit more deeper inside the Emmanuel Haro case. I'm going to have a retired probation officer, Gary York, who's going to break down the system, including its failures. And guys, I'm trying to bring to you stuff that I know that you are asking. So what I did was I take your questions from the comments, I filter it through, and then I look for the guests that best meet the needs of the questions that are being asked. And the only recent update I got right now on the Emmanuel Haro case is there is an update. We have it right here. Just in, Riverside County District Attorney's Office confirms Jake and Rebecca Haro are being charged with both murder and you got the penal code here, CA 148.5, making false police reports. They're due in court, I guess, this afternoon, so this may have been a little bit earlier. And remember, they gotta hear their charges within 48 hours. So I knew this was gonna happen. So that is the latest update. But now, with that said, what I thought I could do is basically, outside of this update, I thought maybe I could bring people in that can discuss more about the process. This way we get more informed as we move things forward. And I really do go by what you guys are requesting. And I just got to say, guys, what you have been doing, helping me grow, subscribing, interacting, commenting. I mean, I try my best to get to every one of them, but you guys are just amazing. You're appreciating the content. We're dedicated to bring awareness to Emmanuel Haro's case. And also, someone did mention to me real quick, and let me give you this one other thing that was sent my way that you guys may find of interest. The name of the person that sent it, actually, guys, let me spell it out because this is their YouTube handle, and I'm going to put it out there for a reason. SAFIYAGARCIA1334. That's the YouTube handle. This is what she's saying. I've been thinking about starting a petition to send to the County Board of Supervisors. My idea is to push for a local law and eventually statewide or even federal that would require parents with a history of child abuse or related convictions to attend their children's child visits. Too often, families skip these visits, but having consistent check-ins with medical professionals could mean another set of eyes on the child and might help prevent future tragedies. If they were more mandated to take him to child visits, maybe this would have been caught or prevented. So these are people that are coming in trying to do something that could be more preventive. They identified concerns with the system, and they're trying to fill those gaps. So I didn't want to leave that message just for me to read. So I wanted to share that with you guys. And for those just tuning in, we are following the Emmanuel Haro case. These are two parents right here. Sorry, that's the wrong picture. I meant this picture. Jake and Rebecca Haro, they are being accused for the murder and now writing false reports for what's going to be the death of Emmanuel Haro. Right now, we still have yet to discover the body, which obviously people are trying their best efforts right now to move things forward. I even had a good dialogue with a former FBI investigator yesterday. If you guys get a chance, check out the video. He talks about a lot, but part of it is discovering the body and the process and how can you charge murder when you don't have a body. It was a very informed dialogue, and if you guys have a chance, I would appreciate you guys taking a look at it. And then also let you know they did try a couple of days ago to bring Jake out, as you can see in this picture here, and people believe that the body was discovered at that point, but it turned out not to be true. The body was not discovered. And some of the conversation we're going to have today is about the gaps of basically Jake Haro has a bit of history. The history really deals with a charge that he had for willful cruelty on a child. This is the child. Her name is Promise. This is what she looks like today, 7-8 years later. He beat her so bad that she has 3% brain function. She can't see. She cannot walk. Basically, she cannot take care of herself. And he was only charged with willful cruelty to a child, which only gave him a 180-day sentence in which he only served one. And for the rest, he was on work release. And people are like, well, work release? I thought work release has a criteria that no violent offenses. Well, guess what? Child cruelty is not considered a violent offense in the state of California. So there's a lot of things I want to discuss here. But again, I just want to thank you guys for tuning in. Let me bring Gary on. He's going to introduce himself. And the questions I got are from you. I just kind of put them together, and there's a lot that Gary has to go over. So let me get him on. Gary York, it's been a while. What's up, brother?
Hello, how you doing? Yeah, it's been a while. I think we did one a few months ago. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Yeah, you get younger.
Maybe through AI, but not here, not in real life.
Hey, Gary, I just want to thank you. I know we kind of put this together last minute. Guys, just to let you know, I spoke to Gary earlier today because I was looking for someone from Child Protective Services. Now, if you guys know somebody, email me, ganjianthony@yahoo.com. I would love for someone from them, from there to be on the show. I have some questions for them as well. But in the meantime, I was reaching out to a bunch of different sites. Couldn't get one, but then I remember Gary York. He was a retired probation officer. And if you look at a lot of the questions here, a lot of questions do relate to probation. So I wanted Gary to maybe answer a few. So Gary, if you don't mind, by the way, guys, my email is ganjianthony@yahoo.com. If you know somebody that was willing to come on, please, I want to start building my guests so I can get the proper resources for us. Hey, Gary, you mind introducing yourself?
Hello, I'm Gary York. I'm retired, 29 years, Florida Corrections. During those 29 years, I did several things, but I was a felony probation and parole officer working closely with the community. And I have worked with the Child Protective Services as a probation officer. We'll talk about how important that is, that probation and parole and law enforcement and the courts work with the Child Protective Services. And I also, at the end of my career, was put out to pasture as a deputy bailiff in a felony courtroom, and I was in family division for 3 years. So I saw a lot of guardian ad litem cases bringing their testimony. I saw the Child Protective Services come and testify, and I saw the mothers and fathers testify, trying to get their children back. I won't give you the rest of the history. I just wanted to focus on what we're talking about today from my background.
And Gary, guys, if you have a chance, Gary does have a channel. We'll go ahead and give more details to the channel later. So if you guys get a chance, please stay for the whole video because Gary could tell you where else he'll be found. And I think Gary is also going to start crossing into some more true crime content as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and read you some questions, Gary, and kind of see where the dialogue goes from there. So the first set of questions are going to come from, we're going to go back in time a little bit. So we're going to talk about the incident with Jake Haro and the infant promise that we mentioned earlier today. So this was in 2018. As a probation parole officer, how critical is information sharing with Child Protective Services when someone like Jake has a violent or child abuse history?
As a felony probation officer, and that was felony probation, he was on. He was still on it during this incident as well. You have to know your people on that are under probation. They call it a client list, for better words. I call it an offender list. And probation officers, yes, they may have 125 files to 200 files to take care of monthly for one probation officer. But still, our job is to know each offender and what they're on probation for. So we know what to look for. So we know what to watch for. Yes, there's the same things that we look for in all offenders, but each one has their specific area of crime that they've been involved in. And we want to make sure that they're not committing those crimes anymore. I think it's extremely important for a probation officer to be aware and keep an eye on this case. Jake Haro, he was convicted of abusing this poor little girl. I think his sentence was way too light. I think he should have went to prison for it. Myself, as a probation officer in Florida, I would have recommended prison, but I'm not a judge. The judge makes a final decision. So I know what he's done in the past. So now I'm his probation officer. Well, when I make home visits, I don't want to just knock on the door and they come to the door. Okay, you're home. Put in my book, 1:10 p.m., offender was home. I have the right to go and look in their house. They're on probation. I want to say, let me in the house. I want to take a quick look. If they don't, then we'll violate them. But what we do is we go through the house and we see if there's any children in the house. How are those children looking? Is the house clean? If I see something as simple as a child sitting on the floor in a diaper eating a cracker, dogs in the house with dog feces on the floor, bird cage open and the bird is on the kitchen counter and feces from birds, do I just leave and say, well, the child looked healthy? No, but something as simple as that. I want to call Child Protective Services and say, hey, looks like we have an unhealthy environment for this child. We need to work together and get on the ball. Can you open a case file on this? Something that simple could save a child's health or life. And obviously, I want to look for bruises on the child. I want to ask questions. I want to let Jake Haro know. I'm his probation officer. I want Jake Haro to know that I'm watching you and I'm watching your movement and I'm going to talk with you about things and I'm going to make sure you're working and I'll make sure you're doing what you're supposed to do. If a probation officer is not doing that and keeping Child Protective Services updated, I feel we have a failure of communication, for better lack of words, and a failure in our system where we're not working together.
Now, Gary, I wanted to go over something real quick, guys. Just so you know, probation is a sentence ordered instead of a prison or jail. Probation, a sentence ordered instead of prison or jail. The person remains in the community under court-ordered supervision. Conditions can include drug testing, curfews, treatment programs, or regular check-ins with the probation officer, and violating conditions can result in jail or prison time. Parole is an early release from prison, allowing the person to serve the remainder of the sentence in the community, supervised by a parole officer with strict rules, and if conditions are violated, the person can be returned to prison. So there's similarities between what the responsibilities are of a parole officer and a probation officer, but I just wanted to make sure that probation is usually there in set of a sentence, and parole is usually the early release of somebody. But again, the officer pretty much has the same responsibility. Follow these rules, you'll be violated. Hey, I had a follow-up question to that that I noted. So real quick, you mentioned that you get to go in the home. I'm sure the scenario you brought was probably a true scenario because I know you speak truth. You as a probation officer, like I always say, like in correctional officers are the eyes and ears for medical, mental health. I mean, we basically are there. We are the number one contact, their initial contact. I mean, we see these inmates when their mask comes off, right? That's what I always say. So would you say a probation officer is the initial or probably the main resource of what's really happening in that house in real time, and maybe Child Protective Services? I mean, I'm sure they play an important role, but I'm assuming that the probation officer, probably definitely at the very beginning, has more frequent interaction than child services may like. Plus, the probation officer, I would think, I'm sure Child Protective Services does too, but you guys go into some very dangerous environments. I mean, that's part of the job. And the follow-up question I had is, so what challenges have you seen when probation and Child Protective Services don't fully communicate? Because you agree, right? You would be the eyes and ears to some extent.
Right. I would hope that us as probation officers are another set of eyes and ears to monitor these people that are charged with child abuse, child neglect. And I would hope that every probation officer gives it 100% effort to ensure that not only the offender is staying clean, but the offender is not harming any children in the house. I feel that is our duty to uphold that protection for those children. Why do I have Jake Haro? And listen, I don't know who Jake Haro's probation officer is. I do want to say one thing. The probation officer cannot be with Jake Haro 24 hours, 7 days a week. So when Jake Haro decides to have a fit and beat this child as he did before, or if he does it again, or he does something to the child that they're looking for now, we can't be there. unfortunately, 24/7. But we can sure lay the law down and set guidelines and let him know we are present and watching. And we can also do things to help get children out of the house if we see danger. So I don't want anybody to think that I'm picking on his probation officer. You can't be there 24/7. But I do want to say that we can be a second set of eyes and ears and hopefully save somebody's life. And it's a very dangerous situation. One thing I do want to say, you said we're allowed to go in the house, which we are. Lots of times when working with the local sheriff or an agency like Child Protective Services, they would say, hey, the local sheriff, we can't go in the house without probable cause and a warrant, but you can. You're the probation officer. You can go in there. So there's a lot of advantages the probation officer has to help work with both sides and the courts.
Hey, that's good to know. So you're right. So if you're a part of the Child Protective Services, you can't go directly in. That you have to be invited in. I didn't know that. Is that true?
With Child Protective Services, they may be able to go in if they have a case assigned. Probation officer can just go in. Say, hey, I'm going to check your house.
Right, and that's part of the signed conditions of probation too, right?
Right.
And then I think you kind of touched on it, but I said it, in your work, how do probation officers contribute as a second set of eyes for child safety? You kind of touched in that. And then if probation had been involved with Jake in 2018, what kind of red flags might they have looked for?
Well, in 2018, the red flags that they could have looked for are actually going in the house, looking for anything suspicious, looking at the child. It's okay to look at the child and see if there's anything suspicious. Also, any raging anger. As a probation officer, if there's any sign to me that there's fits of rage, maybe a family member would tell me, because we do talk to family members as well, and we talk to their employers as well. And if any one of those people tell me, well, he goes off on temper tantrums, he has fits of rage, I want to get him in. I want to drug test him. I want to find out if we need to get this person in anger management. We have tools available. We just have to know what to look for and when to try to use those tools. It's not a 100% fail-safe program. We can't save everybody, but I know we can save a lot.
Now, and what's unique here is obviously he's on probation for willful cruelty to a child. So with that said, you know him, you know what he's about, you know what he's on probation for, at least at minimal. You should know what he's on probation for. So though you're going to target that more than anything else, right?
Exactly. I'm going to make sure he's not drinking, obviously, or doing drugs, which is for everyone on probation. Make sure he has a job, and I'm going to check and make sure he's going to that job. But I also know what he's in there for. That's what he's on probation for, excuse me. That tells me what I need to focus on heavily. I don't want another child hurt on my watch. Because, judges and probation officers and child protective services, when something bad happens, who's the public looking at? They're looking at, hey, what did this probation officer do? What did child protective services do? Why did the judge just put him on 180 days work release, and it all comes back to us. On my watch, I want to show that I did everything I could, because it will be investigated. Everything that we're talking about here, Anthony, that investigation will dig into. What did I do as a probation officer?
Yeah, and you know what? If you go into a house, right, and let's say you do have some feeling, but really just a feeling based on your experience, by the way. So let me see, and I go ahead now and try to talk to, let's say, the spouse, and the spouse says everything's okay, but you still got that feeling. The funny thing is, you still got the liability. You can't lean later on and say, well, I didn't take the baby out of the house because the spouse said it was okay. The spouse at that point, you're giving me information, but the decision ultimately I'm responsible for. Even if the wife is saying I'm okay, there's no concerns with the child, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, what happens to that child after you've walked in there, does become at some level your responsibility, because I'll guarantee you, and you tell me if I'm wrong or right, if something does happen to the child, there's got to be somebody checking the last time people made these visits and what did they see and what did they miss, especially if you have a child that they could prove has long-term abuse, had been abused long-term, and you were just there yesterday. You didn't see that? What happened, right? Would you agree?
Yes, I want to go to my boss, my supervisor, say, look, I really have bad feelings about this guy, and this is what I see, and this is what I feel. Oh, you can't just go on feelings. Well, listen, at the minimum, let me write a report, and let's contact child services, child protective services, and let's get another set of eyes besides me in there. And I would hope that all supervisors of probation parole would say, well, hey, that's not going to hurt anything. That's a preventative measure, right? We don't want to be reactive to everything. We don't want to always react after it's happened. Let's be preventative. Let's use preventative measures. So,
hey, Gary, can I ask something on that real quick? Because you made a good point. I don't want to overlook. Can I ask something? So, obviously, there's a greater liability if you leave the child in a spot where they could be hurt. But obviously, there's also the right for the parents to have a child. So you're asking for a second opinion to, I guess, make sure that you're not taking the child out for reasons that are not enough to take the child out of the house for, correct? Is that what you're trying to do, build a balance?
Exactly, because parental rights are very strict, just as children's rights are. So I want to get a second set of eyes. And what's the worst that could come out of it? They see something. Now together we go to the court, because I'll write something up, possible violation, if we both agree something's going on. Anyway, we'll get in front of the judge, and we want to judge. What's your recommendation, Officer York? Well, Your Honor, I would like the child to be examined by the medical field, a doctor. And they'll say, Child Protective Services, what do you say? We agree with Officer York. We've done a joint investigation, and we would really like the child to, at least that you order that this child be seen by medical personnel. If that's the minimum, we've done something, right?
And Gary, you know what's funny? Maybe you could relate to this before I get to the next question. So I know this is crazy. I mean, you could have, let's say, a probation officer or a child protective service person walk in and be a little bit more paranoid. Oh, they're sitting too close to the corner of a table, and really act on things that, I mean, likely, but not probable. So a lot of times people say, and this may sound crazy, but I think if you're a parent, you may understand this. They sense for love in the house. That's what someone mentioned. Like sometimes you can actually, there's going to be a lot of little things that could always be a concern because, parents, we're learning it as well. So they understand when there could be an honest mistake and getting ahead of it. You don't want to rip the child apart because the family member made an honest mistake. And this is a growing process with them. But there's also another concern where maybe it's not a growing mistake. It's negligence, or it's someone that just shouldn't have a child. So there's something that I think the people that go in, especially maybe from CPS, from their experience, someone had mentioned that they just know sometimes what a loving home feels like when they walk in, and they just know when it doesn't feel that way. Does that resonate at all with you?
Yes, and it doesn't have to be physical, it could be mental. I see this child sitting in the corner just behind the couch like a stone face, not running and happy and saying, playing. And I, as a probation officer, I see that. And that's where training comes in. I'm going to get to that later. But somewhere, if we have to talk about training, we need probation officers and the child protective service officers to receive more training on not what just to look for, but child behavior and things we need to know.
Yeah, so I know, like, sometimes so here's the funny thing, guys, and I'm sure Gary would agree. Sometimes when the presence of authority comes in, the scene changes, and everybody knows that. When you're trained in law enforcement, corrections, whatever it is, when you're on the scene, everybody, well, to some extent, cleans up a little bit. What you see in front of you is not the real deal. It's performative. But at the end of the day, something that Gary said is true, though. The reaction of the child's real. So I could be over attentive performing, but or under whatever it is. But the point is, I think you're right. I mean, yes, the parents could be putting on a show, but the child, there may be certain things that, you know, even for an older child, a toddler, they can't control their emotions. There's going to be leakage. There's going to be something that shows you that there's something wrong. Because I'll guarantee you first, if something looks okay, sometimes through your experience, you know, something doesn't feel right. Something doesn't feel sincere because I don't feel connected to something. I feel that this is something very surface. I'm not connecting to anything deep here. So if I was in the house, and Gary, please tell me if this is the case. If I'm having kind of a concern with trying to judge the sincerity of what's in front of me, but I feel something's not right, I start looking at the child, maybe trying to get them to interact with the child a little bit to see how the child reacts to the parent. Do we have fear? What if the child doesn't want to be next to the parent? Avoid it. I mean, would that make sense? Do you try to encourage some type of interactions there to get a feel?
Yes, it's very hard to get a child to follow a script, and it's okay when you're there to say, well, hey, how are you doing today? Little Anthony, how are you doing today? Is everything okay? And, you know, you see this. All these little nonverbal signs as well, we need to know because it may be something. And another thing, when you go to an offender's home, and I've done this before where I said, well, I'm just going to make sure they're home, but I'm not going to go in their house today. But they come to the door and they step outside the door and they close it real quick, or they leave it about this far open and you kind of look through the crack and then they close the door some more. Little signs like that, then I change my mind no matter how much time I have in the day. I say, you know what, let me just come in for a second, do a quick check, and then I'll be on the way. Because they're giving me indicators that they don't want me to see something in there. You better follow that.
I got a question I don't think's ever been asked before, and this ain't even coming from the questions I sent you, Gary. Sorry about that, but Gary, this is what we do, right?
Yeah.
So, guys, you gotta bear with me, guys, because I have ADHD. Believe it or not, I know Gary knows. My wife will definitely tell you. So I have to formulate the thoughts. But as Gary was talking to me, I have something resonating in my head, and I think this is going to come out right. So bear with me. If it doesn't, all right, we'll go on to the next question. So Gary, you mentioned you got to know that inmate, right? 100%, or know the probation person on probation, right? And then the balance to that would be the child protective service person has to know the child. Two extremes. One side knows the child, one side knows the probation person. If you guys don't communicate, then we don't meet in the middle, which means that, Gary, how much do you know of the child and how much does the CPS person know of the person? Because you're going to get whoever goes in there has to have a full picture of what they see and not just a piece of it, because sometimes the piece of it, if you don't know how to connect it, you know, you're going to fail. But is there any type of communication between probation and CPS so basically people can understand what those two different perspectives are merged?
Well, that's going to go back to training. We did not see this very much. I never trained when I was a probation officer. We never trained with the Child Protective Services, and we need to do that. We need to get together and have training together so that we both know our jobs and we both learn from each other on what you tell me, Child Protective Services, what you need me to tell you. And Child Protective Services, you need to teach me maybe some things of what I need to look for. And together we can become more powerful to stop these criminals and these child abusers from doing what they're doing.
Yeah, because that's a really good picture. Could you imagine, guys, if probation was trained on the family dynamic? Right? I don't know if that's done, but that's great. Okay, so next question I have here is from your family court bailiff perspective, how does the court weigh Child Protective Service recommendations when deciding custody or visitation rights in abuse-related cases?
Let me give you a quick picture. The judge is sitting on the stand. Over here on the right, two podiums are the parents and an attorney representing them if they have one. Over here on the left is the state attorneys representing the child's interest. Also over here on the left at a podium, there's three podiums there, is the Child Protective Services. Also at that podium on the left is a guardian ad litem, which is a volunteer appointed by the judge to check on the child and make sure of the best interest of the child, especially if they've been removed from the home already and now they're in a foster care. And that judge is going to hear from the parents and the parents' attorney what they want. That judge is going to turn and ask the Child Protective Services to give their report. Then the judge is going to say, guardian ad litem, do you have a report for me this week? Because they may meet once every month on the issue or once every 2 weeks. When the judge hears what the guardian ad litem have to say, and he hears what the Child Protective Services have to say, and we've even had probation officers come in there and testify, he also wants to hear what the parents have done. Well, Your Honor, Dad has gone through anger management and Mom has gone through raising child care program. They both completed successfully. He weighs all this information together, and he's only human, and he may decide, you know what, not yet, parents, not yet. I don't think you can have them yet. Let's wait another month. I want you to do this, this, and this. Or he may say, child goes back to the parents tonight. It's a tough call up there for that judge, and he's relying heavily to answer your question on correction, on Child Protective Service testimony and guardian ad litem testimony.
You know what I would like to do eventually is after, hey guys, for the audience here, if you can get me someone from Child Protective Services that you know knows the job, maybe someone that has been on a few networks, I would love to have them on, talk to them solo as well, and then put Gary and them together. And then maybe we could put some questions together that discusses conflicts, because maybe in the process of doing that, we could build a bridge. So if you can help me with a Child Protective Service person, I will talk to them first, formulate the questions, and then I will work with Gary to have them both on and see if we can have an honest dialogue of how to fill in these gaps. And again, not to attack each other, but to build understanding. Because guys, I will tell you this, once we have trust, we can have conflict. But without trust, conflicts become personal. But when you have trust, conflicts are about ideas and strategies. And then once we trust each other, we can get personal and start holding people accountable. All right, so I'm going to move a little bit now to the family court and CPS oversight. So, and again, in general, but this is going to reflect, these are coming from your questions, and this is going to reflect however you want to apply to the case we're looking at. So, Gary, you've seen firsthand how judges rely on Child Protective Services and cases like the Haro family, where there was already documented abuse. How much weight should the court give to the Child Protective Services warnings?
I would say a lot. Number one, Jake Haro's already been convicted of child abuse. So when we get another allegation of child abuse or neglect, I think that the judge needs to really, really listen hard to what reports they're getting from Child Protective Services. And I don't know if California has guardian ad litem like we do, that just explain what they do. And I would think the judge would want to hear from the probation officer as well. I sure would if I was a judge. It's our duty to protect that child. Yes, we have to honor parental rights, but my gosh, isn't that enough documentation and terrible history already on this man where we don't look at him a little harder? No bias. Just look at him harder. I didn't say convict him because of the past. Look at him harder.
Sorry about that. I had trouble on doing the mic. I have the next question here too. Let me just make sure I can unclick that again. Right, there we go. Okay, so Gary, in your experience, what are the strengths and weaknesses of family court when it comes to protecting children in long-term high-risk households?
The weaknesses are they are short-staffed. They don't have enough people to go around in most cases. I consider them like correctional officers, short-staffed. Don't have enough officers. I think there's a lack of training and between Child Protective Services and Probation and Parole. I think there's a lack of training, and I think that needs to be changed. Not only where each entity trains with their own, but then they train together, as you discussed earlier or mentioned earlier. I feel that their caseloads are so high, they're not getting enough time to fulfill each one as they should. Same with probation and parole. But we accept the job as it is. And if I'm a probation officer with 1 month and 150 officers, 150 offenders, and I have to visit them twice a month, then once at work, once at home, or maybe if they're on community control, I have to visit them every week, twice a week. But we're hurting. We're hurting for people. We're hurting for good training. We're hurting for time. And I don't want all those restraints to cause the death of a child. So we really need to do money, funds. We need more funds. I've seen some of the pay scales in some states. Come on, folks. These are the people that are protecting our children. Let's give them a little more money. Money doesn't fix everything, and let's try to hire quality staff who will really pay good attention and do their job. The strengths are in the courtroom, the judge will listen to them.
Can I ask you a question about one of the weaknesses?
Yeah.
Hey, just to follow up on my end, and guys, I apologize. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I don't want to go past one thing with the weakness. If you're understaffed, which I know you guys are, probations is very understaffed, and let's say people go on leave and whatnot, how do you cover each other's regions? How does that work? I mean, because you could be traveling way out of your region, right?
That's a very good question, because now I take a vacation that I'm allowed to have, and I'm gone for 2 weeks. What they did here in Florida was they would split my caseload into 4 sections and give it to another probation officer. Hey, York's on vacation for 2 weeks. You're going to cover 25%, you 25%, and you're going to cover his caseload until he gets back. Just putting more work on another probation officer. And this report has to be done, and we have to do cops, and we have to make sure they're paying the courts, and we have so much to do. Are we hindering the effectiveness of our home visits and getting out there to see what these guys are really doing?
Yeah, because my thing is, I'm wondering when the caseload gets that way, and let's say you're out. I mean, does anything say that you have to visit them within those 2 weeks? Is there anything that mandates that someone still has to go to that site, or does that sometimes say, you know what, I'll just worry about when I get back?
No. They still have to have their visits on time, once a week or once a month at home, a job visit. That has to continue. We can't just let these folks fly alone. And if they know you're on vacation, it's actually a good time for the person covering your quarter of your caseload to get out there and check on them. They may think they have free time now. When the cat's away, the mice will play. You got a good chance of finding out what they're up to when I'm gone, because they think I'm not around, not realizing my other probation officer comrade is going to come check on you.
All right, and then you mentioned the strengths again. I apologize. I wanted to cover that part because I thought that was needed.
Well, the strengths are that the judges that I've seen, I can't speak for across the country, but the judges I've seen take very good consideration of the reports from the law enforcement, from the probation officers, from the guardian ad litem, and from the child protective services. And they take that in the heart, because they know you're assigned to go do this and bring them information they need to know to make a decision.
Yeah, because I'll tell you something. I don't think a lot of people realize how complicated it is. And the fact that you mentioned understaffed, that's great, because maybe there's some resources. Maybe, this county, Riverside or San Bernardino, where I think it was Riverside. Riverside? Am I right? Am I saying it right? Riverside? Hold on. Make sure I give up the right information here. I believe it is, but let me just double check. I have it here. I got my notes, guys. Riverside County. I got it right. They could be facing the same concerns. But the funny thing about that is that hopefully when they have these concerns, the probation officers are also documenting daily the things that can't be done due to the understaffing. Because sometimes, sadly, when it happens for so long, you start to accept it. And then it becomes the norm. Then you start to work, and that is the norm. You know, it's like, no, we still have those problems. We just stop voicing. We'll continue to voice. Every day, if there's something you cannot do, document it. And also be truthful. Don't lie and say you did it when you didn't do it. You know, so, I mean, I think another concern when you get to a point where you don't have enough people, and it's like, well, I'll just maybe do a phone check instead of instead of driving over there today, and I'll count that as a check, you know, just because I don't have time to do it today. Be careful, because sometimes in that pressure to get things done with limited resources, we start to cut corners. It's just natural. It's just we try to be more efficient and more effective. And then the problem is that eventually becomes the norm. One phone call becomes 2, becomes 3, until eventually you're not checking anybody at all. So the next question I got, Gary, is where is it? 5. In your experience, we did that. Sorry. If you were explaining this case to the public, so we're talking about the Emmanuel Haro case, how would you describe the balance and tension between protecting parental rights and protecting children? I wanted to ask that to you because this question stuck out to me for a little bit, because when you're going, we mentioned before a little bit, but I wanted to get a little deeper here. When you're going into the house, right? I'm assuming for you, you know, you want to make sure that there's some level of balance, right? That I'm protecting the parental rights and protecting the children. But I think a lot of us do stay focused on protecting the children, but we're also aware that, you know, parents do have parental rights, and we want to make sure that we don't step on them. And I think sometimes that makes us hesitant, because when you're looking to prevent something, sometimes it's so small that you don't realize it in the moment. But yes, hindsight bias will make it loud, but in the moment you may not realize it. And when people don't realize, it's not that it's something that wasn't caught. Maybe it was saw, maybe we did see it, but maybe it just felt awkward to act on because of the conflict of how these rights need to be balanced. Because everybody will look at hindsight bias and automatically think the picture's a lot clearer. And what they don't take into account is the pressure of dealing with that decision in real time, the social awkwardness of not having enough and then violating the rights of the parents. But of course, it's something that comes out in full picture later on, but in the moment it doesn't. So there is that trying to balance. But I tell people it's small now, but how do you know it's not part of something bigger? So I always think, I don't know if you agree with me, Gary, especially in the prison, I don't look at things in isolation. I even tell the rookies, which is hard for them to understand at first, but they definitely develop. They're going to develop what we call pattern recognition. So something small in isolation is one thing, but I think what people tend to forget is pattern recognition. Hindsight bias also reveals patterns. They do. It reveals patterns because now the context is there. So what I'm saying at the very beginning, it's not so much about the little thing that's in front of me that you may think I'm missing. I'm also trained to look for patterns. And right now that looks like it's isolated. Right now that doesn't look like it's a pattern I have to worry about, because in the long run, we identify patterns that remove us from being paranoid. Would that make sense? And act too impulsively, because or else you'd be changing everything.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because yes, parental rights are very strong, and we can't just go in there like God and act like, you know, whatever we say you will worship. We have to follow the rights and the laws. And what you said is so important to me, because when you make a home visit or a job visit, you don't just document, I was there and he was there. You have to put comments. Jake Haro was there. His wife was home, Rebecca, and the child was home, playing, eating, or whatever. And while I was there, I noticed this, and that. I didn't call anybody on it, but I wrote it in my case notes, because if it's not documented, it didn't happen. And I'm so glad you mentioned it, because you make thorough case notes as a probation officer, and then you start to see this picture develop. That's when you say, hey, I don't want to interfere with parental rights, but it's time to see if I can get Child Protective Services to help, see if we can get the courts to help, you know, as I described earlier. So it's very important that we document even the smallest things, because as they build, it shows a pattern. Thank you for bringing that up.
No, it's you're leading the dialogue, man. I listen. You know, Gary, we worked together for years. I listen to everything you're saying. I try to, paint something that I feel connects to what you're saying. So I didn't really bring it up. I just basically resonated with what you're saying. Hey, I want to toss a question out to the viewers. Should courts lean more towards protecting children at the risk of limiting parental rights, or does that create another set of dangers? I love their thoughts on that. And I have another question for the viewers too, by the way. We kind of answered, but we'll love your thoughts because we learned from what's provided back to us. Do you think probation, parole, and child protective services should have mandatory cross-reporting systems in high-risk child abuse cases? That's going to be, unless Gary, you want to comment on that, or?
Yeah, read that question one more time.
Do you think probation, parole, and child protective services should have mandatory cross-reporting systems in high-risk child abuse cases?
Oh, absolutely. We need to be able to look at each other's files without having to call me and say, hey, I need to come look at your hard file or whatever. Hey, we're in 2025. We need to be able to look at each other's files. Now,
hey, Gary, I don't know if you would have an answer to this, being that you just said that. Do you also, as a probation officer, have a right to the children's files from CPS? Or do you
I was just about to say there's some privacy issues. I was just about to say that there's privacy issues, however, that may prevent me from seeing those files from Child Protective Services. Child Protective Services are a lot more powerful than people believe, because if I call Child Protective Services and say, hey, my neighbor is doing this and this and this to the kids, you'll see Child Protective Services, if they're doing their job, they'll pull up there, but not alone. They're going to bring a law enforcement officer with them. And they can go in the house based on that allegation and check out the house. So they have some power.
Now, do they have access to all your files?
They can have access anytime they want. They just have to request it.
But it doesn't work vice versa?
When you're talking about children now, you know as well as I do, a lot of the records are sealed on children.
Right.
With HIPAA laws for the medical and the child's well-being, and that's all going to be closed. I may not be able to get all that, but Child Protective Services can tell me, we feel there's an issue in the house and this is what you need to look for. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, no, I get that. It'd be great to see if there was ways where
there
could be better connections, because who knows, what's sometimes, unfortunately, and I've dealt with this too in corrections, sometimes there could be a safety concern. And let's say mental health, it's how they subjectively interpret it, by the way. Because some of the things that are not being shared could also be subjectively interpreted as, I'm not sharing it because I don't have to under HIPAA, but that's not HIPAA. That's safety and security. Well, I see it as HIPAA first. Yeah, because you're thinking mental health first. So HIPAA comes to your mind first. I'm thinking safety and security. That comes to my mind first. And sometimes the way we are with our profession, what we view as a priority, if we don't stand there as equals, it could really mess up on how we filter things, where I may protect something thinking that this is more about medical, when Gary may look at the same thing and say, yo, how could you not let me know this?
Well, we can work together very closely still, but there's going to be some things that me as a probation officer, I can't see. If the judge wants to ask me a question about it when we're in court, then he'll ask me a question if he wants to know about that certain area, and I can answer that in court, because most of these cases are without other parents present. They're closed court hearings. So you have to be careful, very, very careful when it comes to children's records. But we can still talk about the safety of the child all day long and communicate how we want to watch this.
Would medical, so abuses, let's say the child it's got you can see patterns of abuse or whatnot, is there any concerns with HIPAA with getting released with probation in case that's stuff they need to know?
Well, I will do a violation report, or just a report, if I feel we need to get child services involved and we need to get law enforcement involved. If I see a child with bruises, I'm definitely calling law enforcement, and I'm calling the child Protective Services. And
Right, but now
together,
let's say they see it, maybe not a big deal, but they see it, and maybe that little bruise could have mean something bigger to you because you were just at the house. Will they automatically communicate with you? Hey, just be careful. The child had a bruise. We may not be nothing, but we want to let you know.
I'll be a witness, and I have in my notes what I saw. I'll have
Yeah,
in
but
my
will they tell
probation
you?
report.
I'm saying. So, like, let's say I'm Let's say I'm Child Protective Services, right? I come in the house. I notice the kid has a minor bruise. Not the end of the world, but it's a minor bruise. Now, granted, maybe there's things that you see from a safety and security side that I'm not aware of, but I don't tell you about the bruise because maybe it's minor to me. Do I have to tell you? Like, if I see a child with if you said you saw a child with a bruise, you have to tell Child Protective Services. Do they have to tell you if they see a child with a bruise? And do they have to notify you?
Unfortunately, I'm going to say no because communication problem between the two of us.
That matters.
We may even have a probation officer that won't report it. I mean, that could be the scenario too. Do we have complacency in probation? Yes. Just a little bruise. Parents said he fell down. I put in my notes. Parents said child fell down, and let it go. To me, it needs to be brought up. All we have to do is call, and we've done our job. I called Child Protective Services because I noticed a bruise on the child's arm, stomach, face, whatever. We have to work together and we have to communicate. But no, that's not happening, Anthony.
My only problem with that is the pattern, the strength of a collaborative pattern is lost. So technically you have your individualized perspective and how you filter things, safety and security. They're going to have their individualized perspective and how they filter things, but the patterns are isolated when I think if there's a way that also on top of that, you bring the experiences together. Can you imagine the patterns that both entities could see together that could also be preventive?
And I would like to ask anybody out there that lives in a county in this country that has that perfect scenario going between law enforcement, probation, and child support services. And if you do, spread the word on how that's being done because that needs to be spread across the country.
Interesting. Okay, I got this gets a little bit more specific now. Again, this comes from the audience, so we're going to talk about the murder charges. Let me see. Okay, with both Jake and Rebecca now charged with murder, which we just talked about, how does the raise questions about whether probation, parole, or child protective services missed critical opportunities to intervene earlier? So you basically, now they're charged. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you had an individual that was charged with abuse in 2023 for a 2018 incident, and what the hell? Because right now, the people that are watching the show, they're very upset with this part, that they believe that Emmanuel's concern should have been prevented, should not even have happened, because at this point here, why did we not do enough with the 2018 incident?
Well, why did the courts give him a light sentence? I'm with you. Why did he not go to prison? To me, the damage that was done to that poor child is more like aggravated battery or even attempted murder. Hey, that's just me. That's only me. That's my comment. Okay, so he didn't get enough punishment, in my opinion. So now you throw him to probation and parole to keep care of. And I think I stated earlier, we can't watch them 24/7. No matter how you believe probation and parole is operated, we can watch them only so much. And if he decides to have a temper tantrum and harm this child while I'm not there, I can't control it. I can only do as much as I can. And the other thing we try to do is report what we observe and get these other agencies on the ball to go check things out with us. Together, we're stronger. But if that's not happening, I guess if I was investigating this, Anthony, I have to go back to my investigator days. I would want to know, did probation and parole for Jake Haro ever communicate with Child Protective Services? Did Child Protective Services ever communicate with Jake Haro's probation officer? Was anybody ever called from law enforcement to go to Jake Haro's home for reports of any neglect or child abuse of this child? That's where we need to go and find out where the breakdown was. I'm sitting here in Florida. I'd love to have that case file in my hand. I'd love somebody to say, hey, you're in charge of that investigation. I would love to investigate who spoke to whom and when and what happened. Otherwise, it's very hard to answer from here.
What you said is spot on, Gary, because I'm so people always tell you all the different eyes we have on this case, or we did have on this case. So once the child was, we believe, was harmed in a home, by the way, this involves probation, local law enforcement, child protection, all these different agencies. But then the one question you're going to ask is, well, are they communicating with you, or are they working in silos? Because individual perspectives are great, but if they're not working in collaboration, you have nothing. You have nothing, because the problem is you're left with subjectivity of what could be the more convenient action. But when you start having multiple people at the table, they actually start presenting a fuller picture where you can decide, okay, this is worth acting on, or this isn't worth acting on. Because the sad thing is you are going to work with a lot of people who do this in routine, who may either minimize or justify what technically shouldn't be minimized or justified. So now the problem is, where's the counter influence? Where's someone else from another perspective saying, hey, is that how you saw it? Because I saw it this way. So hopefully it's great to have all these people involved. But if they're operating in silos, a lot of times people are always going to do, not guys, just human behavior, I'm not knocking anybody, just in general, what's more convenient. And sometimes more convenient isn't about the workload. Sometimes, a lot of times when people do something that they feel is convenient, is because they don't want to manage the conflict that has to come with doing something right without really having the facts yet. You know, so like I may have to confront a parent for taking away their child, and I'm ready to do it. And the first thing that may go through my mind, of course, is my own belief in my actions. So I'm going to lean on my experience. I'm going to truly lean on what I know, trust in what I've learned. But then the next thing is going to be the conflict I have with the parent. And most likely some people may fall into that, you know, allow the conflict to go past what it should so the person can sell their argument. You start weakening your stance because, again, the moment you start exploring whys, they start to manipulate the why. Now the foundation you have is a little bit shaky now. So what do? You start to shift your mindset and start to think of ways that it would be safer for the kid to be there. So your mindset shifts. It goes from heightened alert to what's easier. And probably all happens in a moment where you can't recognize it, where the questions in your head have went from doing what's right to doing what has least resistance. You know, and it shifts like this. And I'm not saying it happens in all cases, but when you have everybody involved, they won't allow your mindset to sneak into some level of complacent habit where you avoid the resistance or the conflict, and rather, I'm just going to do what's right. So I love that, like you said. I love that all these departments have their eyes on there, and it's surface. That's great. I love it. But are they communicating? Or are they operating in silos? Because they're going to be ineffective if they're not communicating, because there's no, again, patterns. There's a lot of things that are not being done when we're not communicating with each other. Is that, Gary, did that make a lot of sense?
No, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm going to tell you, folks, I'm not trying to protect the agencies, because I have investigated. That was another part of my 12-year career, internal affairs. I've investigated where agencies were not doing their job. But I'm not in California, and I can't speak on whether they were or were not doing their job. But when a monster decides to harm a child, or if he did murder this child, or he's involved in the murder of this child, sometimes these agencies just can't stop them. It happens. And even if we do everything we're supposed to do, this guy's a monster. Who knows when he goes off? And they don't assign him to probation and parole 24/7, 7 days a week, where I take him home with me and watch him. He's got a lot of time on his own that he's not being watched, and that's just a fact of the matter.
Yeah, that's it's crazy. I mean, even through this dialogue, we're learning as well. That's why I enjoy doing these discussions, because even when I just talk about corrections, a lot of people just want the tips, but there's no context. You got to give context, because I want to grow in this dialogue as well, and it's just good that we allow to let the dialogue breathe. Okay, so let's see. When you hear that Rebecca staged well, we kind of touched on that. Let's go to the next one. From your perspective, what systematic changes could reduce the chance of tragedy like Emmanuel's repeat? We kind of talked about that, so we could skip over that. So, guys, we did cover that. I'm not ignoring it. It's just I think we covered that. There is a question I have for the viewers. If multiple agencies had eyes on this family, why do you think Emmanuel still slipped through the cracks? And I think that's because gaps. I think that, and we kind of mentioned this before, but when there's gaps in communication from the highest levels, if they're not speaking, these gaps become rays of sunlight that people have to manage in the moment, which is very unfair. So if the higher levels aren't communicating and they're passing down policies in isolation, then eventually when you're working on the floor where those policies are meant to merge, they don't. People wind up going into what's survival mode for their own department. That's how it works. So someone has to clearly provide policies and procedures with the understanding that we're all in this together, because sometimes people will create policies that inadvertently affect another department or another agency. And it's like, well, they shouldn't have written that, because you can't assume I'm going to do that. And now you got conflict on the floor because the person said, well, policy says you're supposed to do this. Yeah, written by your agency, not by mine. So now all this gap up top is being managed in the floor on real time. And the problem is, at this point, when they can't figure it out there because they haven't figured it out, you have victims. I don't mean to be an ass, but so I got 3 more questions, more related to the systematic lessons. So Gary, having worked in both probation and the courthouse, how do you think agency silos, it came right to it, so again, child protective services, probation, courts, etc., contribute to children being overlooked? So we kind of discussed that. Would you like to add anything on that?
I just want to say that we need to do better, and I'm not blaming anybody out there in California. We'll see what happens after the investigation is done, and we'll find out if those agencies, hopefully they investigate and make sure they did everything they could. But we have got to do better. And we need the manpower. We need the professional training that they don't have enough time to give training. We have to give training on working with other agencies as well. And it has to be done. It's just something that it has to be done.
And now, Gary, we did talk about it. What reforms would you recommend? We kind of touched on that. And the last question I got here is, how important is it for the public to understand the pressures of CPS workers, probation officers, courts face when these tragic outcomes happen?
It's hard, very hard. And as you can see, they are arrested for the murder of the child, and we'll have to see how that plays out. But the blame is already going back to probation, parole, child protective services. Let's see if that's really the case, or do we have 2 parents here that have children and then don't want them anymore, and they are killing their children? One question I want to ask the viewers is, why do you think, if it's true that the wife set up this scenario, which God, it's looking like it, that she set up this scenario and pretended she was assaulted, why do you think the wife was used to say this happened and not the father? Do you believe it's because he's already got a conviction for this type of behavior, and people may believe her more, or believe her story more than him? I'm leaning towards, if they did set this up together, he said, hey, you do this because they're not going to believe me. So you be the one that does this. So, I always like to think out the what could be and see if I'm right when they're done with the investigation. Who's going to talk first, her or him?
That's a great question, Gary. I love the audience to see, maybe get their thoughts on it, because I won't bias it, but I'm in alignment with you, more of where the influence is. And also, we know the guy's record. So if he was to bring it up, the first thing, people do is they look at who is this person, and they look at backgrounds. I mean, especially the true crime community, they dig in deep on people. So God forbid if I ever do something wrong, you know, they dig. That's what they do. So they look at the individual. They don't take anything at face value. So they may see someone crying, but they want to know who's crying. I know she claims the mother, but let's find out what she's about a little bit more, which is pretty impressive, and that helps me build whatever discussions we have. I think that's it, guys. As I said, I hope we went ahead and covered all the questions that may have in this area. The really only update was when they were officially charged, which we kind of knew. So I thought I could just fill in some air with talking to a professional like Gary and kind of understand a little bit of the work that's done in those areas. We try to relate it as best we can to the ongoing case, so you guys can kind of take what you can from it, apply it where you need to apply it. I figure we gave way past the surface. We gave perspective, asked some good questions, maybe some foolish questions because we're trying to figure it out. But having said that, just an overall great dialogue. And Gary, do you have anything you'd like to say in closing? Where can I find you, Gary? That's the key.
I have a YouTube called True Prison Stories by Gary York. If you just go on YouTube and put True Prison Stories by Gary York, you'll get my channel. Talks about the good and the bad and the ugly. I don't sugarcoat anything. So some people get offended because I don't sugarcoat, but I'm not there to be a popular person. I'm there just to try to tell what really happens. And I want to thank you for having me on the show. Now, I hope the investigation tells us if there's any problems with our probation and parole and our child protective services, something that was overlooked. I hope it tells us what happened in that area. And I believe in the end, the truth's going to come out and we're going to find out that the monster raised his head again.
And guys, Gary has books on the market too. I wanted to recommend this book today. It's a book I wrote, Manipulation of Code. If you want to get into the mind of the people that think differently, basically in their mind, people are objects. They use them for selfish reasons. This is a good book that it may originate in the prison setting, but everything here is applied to the real world. And I think this is a great book to start kind of taking these lessons we're providing to the whole nother level. But as always, guys, I thank you guys for joining I thank you guys for supporting the channel, hopefully watching the video. Gary also frequents the comments as well. So if there's any messages in the comments that you want to send directly to Gary, please do, because Gary will be checking. And stay safe, and more videos to come. Again, just so you know, I'm going to stay a little bit more focused on this case a little bit, try to follow out to see if we get a resolution. And then I'm already working with Russ, the team, Joe, possibly Gary York, a few people, maybe a gentleman, Bob Chacon, to try to see what would be another good case to work on. So if you guys have any recommendations, hit me up, let me know, and then I will try to start working on where I feel I can add a perspective. And if you guys also, one more request, if you guys feel that you have other experts that you feel would feature well on this channel, email me directly, ganjianthony@yahoo.com, because I'm looking to build my resources. So I have it when breaking news happens. I have someone I can pull in that can help, explain the scene to us. As always, guys, stay safe. Hey, guys.